My grandmother used to make it. It's always very, very good. My second, but she was from it. She was born in Italy. So, okay.
I just want to welcome everybody tonight and thank you for coming. We've got 3 different counties represented and just thrilled to have everybody here. I just want to introduce these two. Tonight there has been chaos in the Republican Party, and it's been a huge part of my life for the last year and a half, as well as these guys and many people throughout the state. And I know there's a lot of rumors, and I just wanted to take this opportunity for you guys to hear and be able to ask questions. I just want to, so interestingly enough, I was talking to Sarah today, and she said, Melanie, weren't you like involved in a lot of these organizations, these people? And I'm like, yes, I was. And so how that evolved, when JD tells his story, a lot of that will be answered, how I kind of woke up to what was going on, and I'm still waking up. But if anybody has more questions for me afterwards, please feel free to ask me about them. And then I just want to introduce my very good friends. JD and I met when I worked for Matt DePerno. He was my Cass County captain. And then when I wasn't working for DePerno's campaign anymore, we stayed really good friends. And when he ran for MRP chair, I helped on his campaign. And that's when he told me a lot of the stuff that was going on. Which he should have won. Yes. So glad to have him here. And then Scott, man, so many of us had so much information. So many throughout the state had little pieces of information, little pieces of knowledge, lots of pieces of knowledge. But we're all so busy, like, how do we get this information out? And JD says there's this guy that's going to write a story. I'm like, this guy? Tell me about him. First story, he knocks it out of the park. He couldn't have done a better job. And Scott, as soon as I read his story, I reached out to him and we've been friends ever since. Scott has been amazing. I don't know where we'd be in this battle if it wasn't for Scott's true investigative journalism and taking the time to learn what's going on. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to JD and Scott. And you can have a microphone.
Melody, did you already hit go live on there?
I did. Yep.
All right. So I'm going to start just kind of set the table and tell at first, how I got into this a little bit more, and a little bit more about my background. I'm just a storyteller, like Melanie said. The investigative work, a lot of the investigative work has been done by people all over the state, and I just had the pleasure of being able to talk to people like JD and other courageous whistleblowers that were willing to come forward and tell their story. So I have been in Michigan for 10 years. I grew up in Arizona. And my wife was from Lapeer, Michigan, and so we moved out here 10 years ago. And I've been a real estate broker. I studied English and creative writing at Arizona State University, and I've always had an interest in writing, and I've always felt like I didn't have a story to tell. And I got into journalism in October of last year. A buddy of mine tried to start he wanted to start a local paper because the small town Lapeer paper was owned by big city Democrats, and it's a very conservative town. And so he needed a writer, and I said, let's do it. So I just started covering everything from sports to city council meetings to sometimes state issues. And in December, I started looking into the conflict within the Republican Party. And as I started digging into it more, I realized that it was going to need a lot more of my attention.
Scott, they can't hear very well. You got to put the microphone closer to your mouth.
Is this better?
Yes, much better. All right, yeah.
So, so I took a leave of absence from the paper, and I came to, shortly after that, I think I met JD, I met some other people that introduced me to JD and several others. Another key whistleblower was Kristen Kleiner, who worked on Christina Cromwell's campaign for 21 months of the campaign. She was working 80 hours a week with Christina and my collaborator. And early on, even before I talked to JD, the reason I wanted to talk to him is because I still knew more about my collaborator. everybody was talking about Mike Lavity, and he seemed like this very mysterious kind of figure. And it was kind of it was presented to me as a shadow operator behind Christina. And so the story that, and we're going to get more into Mike Lavity in a few minutes, but after I told that, I'm just going to jump forward a little bit more to kind of present kind of broad strokes of how I got here. I wrote the story about Mike Lavity, and then I wrote a couple more stories about how the harm that he caused to the party through Christina, and also the other operators that they kind of raised up. And here in the first district, I think you've seen exactly, you've confronted me, probably every single one of you, and I see a lot of heads nodding. You know, it's really remarkable how, you know, I've heard the same story all over the state and now all over the country. That I used to know this person, I used to be friends with this person, they were good people, I don't know what happened.
Yep.
And that's a remarkable story that I've heard all over. And I've come to understand that this is a psychological operation. It's a very deliberate psychological operation that was launched around the time that Mike Lavity got to Michigan, which was 2017, right after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. And if we go back to that time, immediately after he was inaugurated, you might call that Chuck Schumer went on Rachel Maddow's show and very famously said, when you cross the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday to get it back at you. So this is very dangerous and stupid what he's doing. And we've seen those 6 ways from Sunday operations. Many of them have been completely exposed. And so we saw the Russia collision. That was Operation Crossfire Hurricane that was started in June of 2016, before Trump was even elected. Yeah. And we saw the impeachments. We saw 2 impeachments. We saw the virus that was made in a lab that your first district's Dr. Huff, that was going to be here, that he worked for EcoHealth Alliance. He witnessed firsthand that how they wrote grants to the federal government, grant proposals, to send money from our federal government to the lab in Wuhan to produce the virus as a result of gain of function research. They were trying to create a bioweapon with our taxpayers' funds. And so that's another operation. And the timing of that was deliberate. And for the next thing that we saw, which was the next operation, which was a stolen election.
Yeah.
And so the timing of the virus was a key contributor to obviously this unlawful, especially in the 7 swing states, this unlawful act of mail-in ballots. And so, you know, we saw all of these things done to us and done to President Trump as a result of him standing up to not just the intelligence community, but the the Marxist bureaucratic deep state. And there's another operation now that, and this is just what I've stumbled into, just by following the evidence, which is this nationwide operation to infiltrate the grassroots. It's a psychological operation to infiltrate the grassroots and turn them against the Republican Party. And what you've seen here in the first district, and what we've seen statewide, I've also seen they use the same language, they use the same Bible verses, they use the Bible as a weapon against their own followers to lull them into a sense of receptivity, so that they'll believe everything that they have to say, because they believe that, well, this is a good Christian, and they're using Bible, they're putting the Bible. So, you know, it's all very, very calculated. They use the same Bible scriptures, they use the same language, and they all appeared at around the same time, right after the election. They knew that the election was going to be stolen. They knew we'd be pissed off about it. And so they positioned themselves to be thought leaders in the space of election integrity. And what I've seen, so I've looked at Arizona now, even in more detail than I've looked at Michigan. There's nobody else covering this at all in Arizona, just like there wasn't here in Michigan. And Tomorrow, actually, they have a state convention, and it's a really crucial state convention. Arizona's a mess. It's much worse than it is here. I'm very, very concerned about Arizona. But what I'm even more concerned about, I've also looked at Idaho, and South Carolina, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, Nebraska, and Florida. And it's happening exactly the same in all those states. I interviewed Solomon Yu, who is a RNC committeeman from Oregon. And I had to, if you haven't seen my podcast, I have a podcast and it's on biggertruth.substack.com. And I interviewed Solomon Yu twice this week. He is an amazing man. He's been on the RNC for 24 years. He's a dissident of the Chinese Communist Party. And so he escaped as a child from the Chinese Communist Party. His family helped him to escape on a student visa. And so he told his story about how he escaped the CCP. And then he worked, he came here with nothing as a student. And I believe it was 1980. And in 2000, he was elected to be RNC committeeman for Oregon. And since then, he has been serving the party and serving his state and the country through that position. And he calls himself the world's #1 investigator of CCP infiltration in the United States. And he's a humble man. He's not overstating his ability there. In the interview, in both of the interviews, he talked about several CCP infiltrations that he has identified and helped to stop within the RNC, within Trump's orbit. And then we also discussed how the CCP actually was involved in this operation. So that was really a groundbreaking podcast. There's not been anything else like this, reporting-wise, in the country. And so it's my hope that by the end of this talk, and I look forward to your questions, and you're welcome to interrupt, especially as we start our conversation, with any questions or if there's anything you want us to clarify or comments. And if you're live here, wherever you are, you're welcome to join us that way as well. And Melanie's going to be sharing comments that you might produce live. So
They're still having a hard time hearing, so make sure you guys keep the mic.
okay.
Yeah.
All
Keep
right.
the microphone. I know you have to do that, JD.
So where we are now is the thing that I'm most worried about is the national convention. We'll get more into that. But what I want to step back now, I want to talk about my gravity, and I'd like to hear, JD, I'd like you to share kind of your story about how, because if we can understand how we got, then we'll better understand where we're going, where we are now, and then we'll better understand where we're going and what we can do about it. So it's my goal that by the end of this, that anybody, all of you and anybody listening live would have a better understanding of what's going on within the Republican Party than most people that are within the RNC. The handful of people within the RNC that I've talked to and shared my thesis with and enthusiastically agreed, it's kind of been like, oh my goodness, you're right.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I've invented. This is just in the same way that I was able to piece all these things together about my gravity by talking to different people and getting different stories. This is what I've been doing across the country, just talking to people all the time and gathering stories. And so this isn't necessarily my story. I'm just the one that for whatever reason, God has chosen to assemble these stories and share them. So, JD, how did you come to know my gravity?
Okay, I got into politics in 2020, probably like a lot of people. I wasn't paying attention to it before, but when Trump lost the election, like a lot of people, I was angry. And the first thing that came to my attention was Matt Perno and Antron, who wrote that forensic report. And I have a background in cybersec forensics. I used to teach it, train it, and I published papers. I want to talk about that a little later.
JD, hold on.
So I spent some time explaining this to people, like people were trying to understand the Perno's report. What did that mean? So after a while, that led to Michigan Precinct First, MIPF, I got an invitation to join their group. And I'd never met them before. Now, that was December of 21. And it was great because I was becoming aware of delegates in the Republican Party. And at that time, Michigan has slots for 15,000 delegates in Michigan. And at that time, less than a third of those slots were filled. People talk about the grassroots, but you know, 2/3 of the operating body is missing, right? So that appealed to me, and MI Precinct First was the first group that was trying to organize and recruit delegates. And that aspect is really good. There's a lot of, if you go to their site, mipf.com or miprecinctfirst.com, and look at their delegate training material, it's all good. I can't think of anything wrong with it. It's very educational. And anyone who's in the Republican Party, whether you're a delegate or not, needs to read it so that you understand how the party works, because most of the people don't understand how the party works. We're not a democracy. And that's a really, really important thing. When you think you're a democracy, you're a mob. And if you look at how certain groups of people are operating now, they're operating as a mob. So
It's a French Revolution kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't meet Labby for the first, I don't know, 2 months or so that I was in it. What he does is he watches people, and he watches you to see what you can do. And when you do meet him, he tells you that he's a profiler, and he does. He profiles people, and he only approaches certain people. You know, he has to see you, behave a certain manner. He has to believe that he's going to get something out of you, what he specifically wants, and he's very disciplined about that. So the first task that we had, and when I was introduced to him, was that February there was a state committee meeting that was going to happen, and they wanted to make a motion to have hand counting instead of the machines. And at that time, everyone was freaking out about the machines. Oh, we could only count by hand. And the current chair of the party had paid $25,000 to rent the Dominion machines to count the votes at state committee, which really angered everybody. And so the delegates didn't understand how to make a motion on the floor to undo that. This is just where people didn't understand procedurally what to do. So the first thing I did was I worked with training people, what are Robert's rules? What are the party rules? How do you make a motion on the floor? How do you do an argument that convinces other people? If someone says you can't make a motion, how do you know that you can make a motion, right? So we did some really intensive training on that for like 6 weeks. We did mock sessions, and that's kind of where my whole training thing started. Was out of that when I realized that people needed to understand how does this government work? What can we do? That interested me because when I was at the Republican Party and going to meetings, I would see people show up and they would be frustrated. They didn't know what to do, so they would just leave. So one of the keys to getting involved in the party is, knowing what you can do. If you show up at a meeting, what can you do? What can you not do? And if you know that, then you can participate. So I wanted to pursue that. That ended up going into what was it, the next convention that we had after that, which was
August 3rd.
well, there was another one before that. Yeah, there was another meeting, a little foggy now.
I think it was April.
It was April.
So anyway, that work all went really well. I was working with some good people, with the delegates. We felt we were trying to save the state. Everyone was really focused, and the work was good. And then some weird things started to happen. And what I began to notice after you work with Labby for a little while, he wants you to say certain things, and this is really the key part. And if you don't say what he wants you to say, then he just stops working. And so that he tried that once with me. Now, pretty much stopped our relationship. Wasn't going further. And then there came the last time I spoke with him was he wanted me to work for free for Christina Carano's campaign to run their IP management. I told him I wouldn't do it. I told him he had to pay me a full-time salary. And anyone who was running for a statewide campaign would have the money to do that. And he said that they weren't going to have the money to do that. And that really caused me to question, think about that. You can't run a statewide campaign without millions of dollars. You just can't. And they had no plan to raise that money. In fact, at one point in time in one of the meetings, she was told, don't go door knocking. Don't do that. Now, why would you do that? So something wasn't right.
Actually, it was not just that they didn't have a plan, they actually had a plan, but the plan was to not.
Yeah, you can talk about that later. There's a plan behind the no plan. Okay, but that was like my first
But that's just
indicator.
what you just described, actually, is that he was telling you his plan. The plan was to not have the money to pay you.
And that was the last time I spoke to him. He wrote me a really nasty letter. That was the last communication that we had. But I was still in MIPF because he has people that are running that. But there were no activities that took place that he wasn't behind. And I was in the meetings when Christina was running her Secretary of State campaign. I think she forgets this sometimes. It was clear to me that he was telling her what to do. She wouldn't make her own decisions. She was very indecisive. She had no plans of her own. You know, he did what she was told. So there weren't any other options for SOS, and SOS is like a defined job. So I wasn't all that worried about that. What I decided to do was I stopped working with Mike and I just started training people. And I felt like it would be important to train people in the Republican Party how the party works. And so I spent a lot of time running around and do that. I had two things. I had a free training and a paid training. And once I started training people outside of MIPF, that's when they got really angry. It was like, as long as I was training the people in MIPF, they were fine with me. But as soon as I started training anyone who was outside of MIPF, now I wasn't in. So that's weird. Last time I checked, we're all supposed to be educated in this country. So that started causing really problems. And then
And that's a very common thing, you know, that they do intentionally, you know, limit the delegates, the precinct delegates, and precinct committees in every state. They limit their access to information. They limit their access to people. And that's really what started happening. August 22 was really the turning point, right? And you were involved in that. I think that actually the turning point was when you got on stage at the convention in August 22.
yeah,
And maybe the week leading up.
okay, don't distract me. Let's go back to Labadee for a second. So, the thing to note about Labadee is if anyone has kept any of the campaign material that Christina published when she ran, you'll start to notice some very interesting things. There's a scientific thing called NLP. It's called neuro-linguistic programming. Okay, you know it's a thing. It's very popular with very high-level sales executives, and it's a way to win people over. We are what we say. That's biblical, right? We know that. And when you get people to repeat words over and over, they become what they say. And I started to notice this over the summer until that August convention. But after that August convention, it really ramped up. And if you notice, there started to be a lot of anger. There was, okay, so people started to get on Telegram en masse at this point because everyone was, freaked out about communications and tensions within Republicans were very high about being monitored and watched. And so people were going to Telegram. Well, what showed up on Telegram right after the August convention were people who were poisonous with their words, very, you saw a lot of Christians berating other Christians and talking about, you're a sinner, or if you do this, you're a sin, or if you disagree with me, you're a sin. This is really what accelerated. This was going back to the first time I met Labadee. What he talks about is sin, Old Testament sin. He never talks about the New Testament. He talks about Old Testament sin. Isn't that weird? And he wants people to, God focuses on redemption. He focuses on sin. And if you notice a lot of the angst that came out. There were, a lot of accusations. This really heated up on Telegram in terms of blaming and causing division. And if you want to know what the source of division, you can narrow it to a small group of people that were very insightful. And these are Christian people. So when you talk about, they know the Bible, they know scripture, they know how to use it, what Jesus tells us to do is look at the fruit.
Yeah.
So what was the fruit? Why is there so much anger? And where is that coming from, and why is it directed? If you're a Christian, you know there's no political solution to this, right? Only revival works. So we know that. So we have peace about that. We're called to do the best that we can with what we have, which is shine the light. If you're a Christian who's not shining the light, you're just not being a Christian. If you're a Christian who is trying to force someone into Christianity, well, what's that? That's what Muslims do. So, I mean, that's a different religion where they force your views upon people.
What you were just talking about was actually, what Lavity was doing was to try to, guilt people into shame and, and focus on that shame and guilt. The enemy, and the Bible says that Satan is the great accuser. And that's what you see. That's actually the fruit, is these accusations, constant accusations, constant attack. In Arizona, someone told me that Jim O'Connor is the spiritual guru of the disruptors there, and he holds prayer meetings twice a week. And what they say is they come together, they pray, and then they go to a meeting and they pray on everybody there. And that's exactly what they do. That is they do.
Well, we're told in Scripture, I never understood this until fairly recently, but we're told that the birds of the air nest in the trees, and the tree is supposed to represent the church. So, what are the evil spirits doing in the church? So it should come as no surprise that bad people are in a good organization, right? That's where they go to disrupt. So, one of the things Lavity has is a plan. And one of the things that most Christian or most Republicans in the party, because the Republican Party is not a Christian club, right? It's a political party, and we're participating in it, but we don't mix the two up. I forgot what I was going to say about that. It was important. He has a plan. Most people in the Republican Party don't have a plan. We're always so busy putting out fires. We don't have a long-term plan. But if you look at what the Democrats have done, it's the result of a long-term plan. If you look at what Lavity has done, it's the result of a long-term plan that actually started in 2019. And it took a long time. What he did was he fed off of a certain sentiment. You take frustrated people who have a certain belief, you tap into it. But what he did was he got them saying the wrong things. Because if you look at what some of these people are saying, they're not what your pastor would say to you on Sunday. And you know that what your pastor says to you on Sunday is what you should be saying to everyone else during the rest of the week, right? There's a disconnect there. You have some people who are claiming Christianity, but not acting it out. When Caramo first became chair, one of the first things that happened was there was a press release, well, it was an interview like this one, where Dan Hartman, the newly appointed general counsel, was saying that unless you were a certain kind of Christian, you didn't have any basis in the party. So they were immediately exclusive, but then sent out all these accusations about being divisive and in unity. And the call to unity was, well, you need to agree with us. And there's nothing Christian about that at all.
That's communism.
Exactly.
And so this attempt to force people to think a certain way, to agree with me, and to say certain things is not the core of our country or where we came from. Our fathers wanted. People talk about division and arguing. Arguing is good. We're supposed to argue. You know how long it took to write the Constitution? 10 years. And that was a lot of arguing. So, if you have ideas and you're all arguing about, ideas, that's not divisive. That's good. Now, if you spend your time tearing each other down, that's not good. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is if you disagree with me, then you're bad. And there was a lot of that. You can track it to the things that were written online. You can track it back to the accusations on a personal level. You know, if I don't agree with you 100%, then I'm bad. The only basis we're called to judge is, you know, is someone following the Republican Party platform? And most people haven't read the preamble, so they don't know what that means. So, you know, we don't have to agree on many things as long as we stick to what the party platform is. There's a difference between conservatism and being a Republican. They're not the same thing. You may be both, but a Republican is a member of a private party, and that private party has rules, a platform, and then we agree to stick on it. That's why if one of our elected representatives goes off and does something, we're like, hey, you're going against the platform. We can identify it, right? So, you know, that's the difference.
And you're kind of talking about narratives there, and I'd like to go into that just a little bit more. You know, narratives in the sense of, you know, things that we believe. And what we've seen on the left, I just kind of want to step back. We've seen on the left how they use narratives to control the way people think, right? And it's very obvious, you know, just looking at COVID, for example, you know, the way that they use narratives to incite and to manipulate people on the left, you know, people that paid attention to mainstream media. And that included people in the middle and some Republicans, the way that they were manipulated into irrational fear. And we see the same thing in the grassroots. And if we look at, you know, we're instead of there is fear that we're manipulated into, but more than that, we're manipulated into anger. And I want to give a couple examples of that. So one is in 2020. Go back to November 3rd, 2020. How many people stayed up late at night watching the returns? I was up till like 3:30. Yeah. And the moment that I knew that there was something seriously wrong was when Joe Biden got up on the stage and gave a stupid smile. He said, by the way, we're going to win Pennsylvania. At that moment, Donald Trump was up by 650,000 votes in Pennsylvania. And that's when I knew there was something seriously wrong. So the next day, but even before that, I mean, as soon as Fox News called Arizona, at the moment that the polls closed, that's when we really knew that there was something wrong. When they were delaying on calling Florida, when it was so obvious that Trump had won Florida, you know, so there were all these things, but all of that was deliberate. They wanted to drive us away from the mainstream media and away from Fox News. They wanted to change our media viewing habits. And this is something that I don't talk to very many people that understand this yet. So they drove us away from, they were lying to us. We knew that they were lying to us. We were a target. You have to understand that. So they knew that they were going to cheat. They knew that half of the people were going to be really mad about it. And they had a plan for how they were going to manipulate us. And so that plan, the first step of that plan was to drive us away from the mainstream media and drive us into other sources of media. So where did we go? We went places like Bannon's War Room. We went to independent podcasters and journalists that were many, I now understand, are in the Mike Flynn network. And we listened to people like Patrick Byrne and Mike Lindell. People, and you know, the funny thing is that all of them were talking about, from the very beginning, they're talking about machine fraud. They were talking about a lot of things that weren't necessarily true. And I think that the whole machine fraud narrative was a distraction narrative, because where the fraud really occurred was in the voter rolls and with the mail-in ballots, and that's where they didn't want us to look. But anyway, so they drove us away from Fox News. They drove us away from even Newsmax. You know, all the big ones. They wanted to confuse us. They wanted to try to isolate us. But they also had a plan for these alternative media sources that we would come to trust. Now, when I interviewed Solomon Yoon, he said he had just an absolutely shocking, and one of the infiltrations that he described was just, it shocked me deeply. I listened to Steve Bannon like for 3 years straight. I almost never missed an episode. I was a junkie. And I'd listen on double or triple speed as I was doing chores or mowing the grass or whatever. And so, you know, I remember the general part. You know, I don't remember too many of the episodes. There's one in particular that I remember that I'm going to get to in a minute. But what he found, does anybody know Miles Blow? Anybody heard of Miles Blow? So if you've listened to Steve Bannon, you know who Miles Guo is. He's a Chinese billionaire who he was on, especially during COVID. He was on all the time, like almost every single day on Steve Bannon's show, his War Room show, almost every single day. In fact, for months actually, Steve Bannon filmed his show either in Miles Guo's yacht that was parked, I think, in New York Harbor, or in his penthouse suite in New York, in Manhattan. And so he had a very close relationship with Miles Guo. Miles Guo talked about the CCP, talked about how bad the CCP was, how evil it was, they also talked about the Chinese people. This was a consistent part of the message. He called the Lao Bing, which is like the deplorables of China. And Solomon said that it was that message that really kind of raised the hairs on the back of his neck. And then he started listening to him in Chinese, because he obviously speaks Chinese. And when he's in Chinese, speaking in Chinese on his Chinese shows, he's praising China and talking about how great communism is and how stupid Americans are. And so he alerted he alerted President Trump, he alerted other people, and he has now been indicted as a double agent. That when they raided his apartment, they found PLA lapel pin. So especially for the Chinese, the lapel pin is very, very important. Their dress is very important, and that lapel pin identifies them. The PLA is the People's Liberation Army. It's like the CIA and the DoD combined.
Cool.
So he was an agent of the PLA. These were 24 karat gold lapel pins, so this isn't like some trinket. But it wasn't just that. I mean, there was a mountain of evidence that shows they confiscated all 11 of his passports. He had been giving material benefit, financial aid to Steve Bannon for months and months and months, leading up to the election problem. And even to this day, Steve Bannon continues to play his music, his take down the CCP music, even to this day. This is Miles Guo. This is a homage to Miles Guo. I found this extraordinarily shocking and confusing because this is a false flag operation. And we don't even think, like normal people just don't even think on these terms, right? I thought that all of the CCP's intelligence, weaponization, like all of that was oriented towards praising the Chinese Communist Party. Why would they come to us and criticize the Chinese Communist Party? And the reason is because they wanted to infiltrate the grassroots. And Solomon said that he grew up under the CCP. He had to leave. They threatened his parents that they had to correct him or he was going to be killed when he was a teenager because he spoke up in class about how the evils of communism. and so he had to flee. And he's been fighting communism, fighting the CCP through the RNC for 24 years. And so he knows it better than I do, better than anyone in this room, better than anyone probably in the world. He's close friends with Gordon Chang, who's probably the leading expert on the CCP. And so this is a really interesting, so that's one data. We'll talk more about Mike Flynn later, but Mike Flynn also was paid, he received, at least we have documentation that he received $50,000 from Miles Guo. Mike Flynn was the director of the DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Administration under Obama. The DIA, I didn't know what this was until I started looking into this. The DIA is the Department of Defense's version of the CIA. What they do is weaponized intelligence. He was in the intelligence community for 33 years, and he was the very top of the DIA, weaponized intelligence, under Obama. So, he was a registered Democrat until 2021.
Right.
And he only changed because he wanted to become a precinct delegate for it. And that was in Sarasota. And Sarasota now has two parties. The America First Party in Sarasota. I just read an article just last month. They formed a new party. They took the bank account. They took the office furniture. They even took the coffee maker. And they're being sued now by the rest of the party that was kicked out and left without any assets. So, and that, this is, and those are people that were like with Flynn. So, it's just, and that's the fruit of the whole thing. We will talk more about that because I think that's really important. And it also relates to the national convention in a very startling way. So going back to November of 2020, we started looking at alternate sources of media. I started looking at Steve Bannon. There were many others. And one thing that they all had in common is they were talking, they were focusing us on anger about, it was the greatest crime, I think, in American history. And there's reason to be angry about it, but they wanted us to be. And we went to January 6th, and when Mike Pence did what he did on January 6th, he became the object of hatred. And from that moment forward, there was a narrative, which was rhinos are the cause of all our problems. And we must hate rhinos. They're worse than Democrats. And so that happened, starting with Mike Pence, but then also even here in Michigan, with Shirkey, Chatfield, there were Republicans Myers. There were Republicans that at least theoretically, and we were told by these media sources that these Republicans could have done something to stand up and prevent Trump from no longer becoming president. In my view, I don't know that there is anything that they could have done, but we were told that they could have done that. And we were told that it was because of these rhinos that Trump is no longer president. So then, many of us also went to Q. I started looking at Q around that time because I was just looking for answers. And I was looking, and I only looked at it for a few weeks, and then I saw that the reading between the lines was very illogical, and that alerted me. Because you're forced to look between the lines to try to draw different connections with different things in ways that is not in concert with the science of logic. Science of logic demands that we go to the root to try to understand the evidence, go as close to the source as possible to the evidence, look at actual evidence, and examine that evidence with an open eye to maybe this isn't actually real. But part of the nature of Q is it kind of forces us to draw connections that are logical in nature. And that's the nature of any psychological operation, is they want us to divorce ourselves from logic. We see that on the left very easily, right? And it takes a lot of humility to be able to see that on our side. So we go to, many of us thought, well, so somehow Trump's going to be, they're going to delay the inauguration or something. They're going to do something. Something's going to happen. The White Hats are going to come in.
Yeah, we were waiting.
Yeah, something was going to happen, and grab your popcorn because it's going to be good, right? And so something was going to happen, and what happened on January 20th was Biden was inaugurated and Trump went to Florida, and it was crushing. It was for a lot of us. We had a lot of hope that something's going to happen. This is so unjust, and we couldn't bear the thought of 4 years of a Biden dictatorship. So then. The nexus of this whole operation happened on February 6th, 2020, just over 2 weeks later. And that is when Steve Bannon had Dan Schultz on the show. Dan Schultz founded the Precinct Strategy. And he follows me on Twitter, and sometimes he likes my stuff, and I'm really hoping to be able to have him on my show. Because I don't know if he had malintent or not. I do know that he was an Army intelligence officer. And that's something that he has gone to some pains to conceal. But what happened in that show is that they presented the only solution that made sense to many of us who were angry and hopeless, really, about the state of the country and we're asking, what can we do to save our country? And that was the answer that was given to us, was the rhinos are the problem, right? The rhinos are the real reason why, which they weren't, and the real reason why Trump was not president is because the Democrats, people like Mark Elias and the deep state stole this election. But we were told that rhinos were the reason why that happened. We had our anger and our hatred was directed at these rhinos. So the solution was to become a precinct delegate and kick out all the rhinos from the party. That was the message. That was Dan Schultz's message. That was the message that was hammered into us on February 6, 2021, on Steve Bannon's show. He had Dan Schultz on his show almost every week after that, almost every day for a while. And Anna Camp, who founded MIPF, has publicly credited that very show for the inspiration behind creating MIPF. And so, that is right there. That's kind of a narrative that shows the story about how we were manipulated first into anger, then into a false idea. The false idea is that the rhinos were the cause of the problem. Now, were the rhinos a problem? Yes, but they were not the cause. But many of us, I including myself, believed that they were. And that was the leap in logic. That was where logic broke down for us because we accepted something that was true that wasn't. And based on that, I ran for county commissioner here, and I narrowly lost. I ran as an ultra MAGA, total grassroots, I said all my stuff, I'm ultra MAGA. And what I've learned in the last few months is, I wouldn't say that it's brought me to the center, but it's changed the way that I view myself. And a lot of that's because of the language that you talked about.
So I'd like to talk about what this means to the party. I don't know how Larry thinks or his motivations, and there's things I don't know, but what I do know is what they did. And so there were a couple things that they did that affect the party, right? One of the first things was the notion of open versus closed primary. Okay? And in one level, that sounds good. And no matter which way you sit on the fence, it has ramifications. But what they wanted is to build the delegates, and the delegates would function as a single cohesive vote, basically, and they would control who got elected everywhere. That's what they want right now. Okay, and this isn't me speculating. They put this on writing. This is what they said. They want the delegates to decide. That's not the way that our system works. Ted Cruz at one of the RNC conventions had to go before the RNC and make a motion for delegates to vote their conscience. And that sounds really good, vote your conscience, right? But see, the thing is, you're already free to vote your conscience. But what most people don't understand is when you're a delegate, you don't get to vote your conscience. How many people understand that? Yeah. Because the rules of the party say when you are a delegate, you are representing the vote of your county. And your county is supposed to give you instructions. We want this. You're going here to cast our vote. And what they've turned this around to is you get to decide. You get elected as delegate, and then you vote however you want. Okay, that's not correct. I'm not trying to say one's better than the other, but I'm just telling you it's different than what the party is, and most people don't understand that. So there is an important aspect of taking direction from your county and saying, I'm casting a vote for my county, right? When you're a delegate of the county, that's your job. So that's one of the things that functions as just pure ignorance. Okay, you don't know something, you don't know how it's supposed to be, and so you actually do something wrong. And one of the problems with that is that when someone stands up to try to do the right thing, people who are doing the wrong thing out of ignorance call that person wrong. And then there's these big fights over what is actually, right and wrong. And this does cause problems in the party. Do you have the Caramo document, the Caramo Constitution manifesto? You have that?
I probably have it on my phone, but it's streaming. So.
Okay, so there's a couple other things that have happened in the party. In December of last year, Caramo sent an email to all of the state committee members and said that Jim Kopis, who was her appointed executive director of the party, was going to spend all of his time rewriting the party rules. Okay, now why do our rules need to be rewritten? We have the best party on the planet. If you're all participating in the party, every single one of you right now is free to bring an argument of your opinion, make an argument, and try to get it passed. And there's nothing held against you. if you notice that there weren't actions done, their answer to the problems was not actually doing work within the party framework. It was they want to rewrite the rules. All right, well, there actually is a document now that got passed. It was voted on. It wasn't passed because they voted on it after they were removed from the party. But there's people in the party, about 1/3 of the members in the Republican Party, voted on a document. But I think you have it. It's there. You can see it. And it's the new rules of the party. One of the many things in it is it has a loyalty test. And you can be removed for failing the loyalty test.
It actually says that a loyalty to the party is higher priority,
Paramount.
is paramount over your personal priorities.
Communism.
Yes, exactly. It actually says that. It says loyalty to the party needs to be more important to the delegates than their own personal priorities.
And it's a basis for removal.
That's right.
And it grants powers to the chair and the general counsel. Okay? The general counsel is an appointed position. And what have we seen the problem we've had with appointed officials making decisions, right?
Yeah.
Unelected bureaucrats making decisions that you have to live by. So, this is something that they've done. Why they did it, I don't know. I don't care to speculate. All I know is this is what they did. So this is what they tried to do. And the battle going on in the party right now is who's going to control the party. And there are people who want that document passed. So in August, they're gonna raise their delegates who think like them. Now, who could this be? We already know that Democrats, when they can't run on their platform, they come over to the Republican Party, and they're not rhinos, they're flat out Democrats. They come and run on our platform. We already know this, okay? So, delegates have been an ignored situation for a long time. A lot of delegates were elected because you just got 2 votes. Your mom and your friend voted for you and you're in, right? So that's going to change. We have right now, half of the delegate slots are open. And what is the party going to do to change that? We have to go out and generate awareness and get people to run and make sure that we have, good people running and the health of the party. I don't think the health of the party is division or arguing. I think arguing is healthy. Now, turning people down is different. You and I could argue bitterly about, X and Y. That doesn't mean I need to disrespect them. That doesn't mean that you're not patriotic. It's when you argue, you bring things to the surface and you explore the issue. We're not all supposed to agree. In fact, the nature of the party is divisive. I'm going to prove it to you right now. What does it take to win a vote?
Somebody to lose.
It takes a simple majority. What is a simple majority? 51%. Okay, 50 plus 1. Okay, now think about this. This means that 49% of you are going to be unhappy. That's divisive. Okay, that is divisive. All right, there's no situation where it takes 90% of the people to pass something where you're all happy. But you get together, you argue for the best idea, and the slight majority carries the day. So this expectation of division isn't the problem. It's this: you either agree with me 100% or you're out, and that's the real source of the problem.
Ronald Reagan said, if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my friend and ally, you're not my 20% enemy.
Yeah.
And that is something that it's not just that it's lost on these people, they are taught not to believe that. They are taught very systematically to hate anyone who does not 100% agree with them. Not just to dislike them, they're taught to hate them. Exactly.
I've been called sister of Satan by a former friend of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had, there's a fellow in Arizona named Brian Florence, who is, he's the most vile of all the characters that I've looked at in any state. And he's written these horror novels that objectify children, and he calls himself a Christian. And so he actually just wrote a very lengthy, multi-thousand-word expose on me. And which I'm very flattered that he took so much time, because he probably spent weeks on this. And And much of it, he went as much, he went on the Wayback Machine to find all kinds of stuff on me from the past. And it's all like, there's many just overt lies. And there's many things that I've freely admitted to. I have nothing to hide. I'm a new creation. And I was a sinner and I was born again about 7 or 8 years ago. So, but this is what they do. They want, and the character assassination was a big thing that you've been a target of that, JD. And that really happened like after that turning point in August of 22. That's really when the campaign, that one of the things that I've argued in my reports is that, like you mentioned earlier, that Secretary of State campaign was never intended to work. And it's the same thing in Arizona. Kari Lake is actually very much like Christina Caramo in many ways. And she intended to lose the general election in Arizona. What happened, there was a very similar change at the same exact time in August of 22, right after the primary there. There was in every state, it's very interesting, there was a major shift in energy, in attitude and energy in August of 22. Normally after a primary, what does a candidate do? They broaden their message, right? They want to appeal to a wider audience. They target the independents. But what Christina Caramo did is she narrowed her audience. She wasn't going after the general election. She didn't even try. Her audience was 100% the incoming class of precinct delegates, these new precinct delegates that were Steve Bannon listeners, that were, that they might have been Q followers or that, that whatever, they were, or independent media, that they consumed this independent media. And they were that was the target. And so that's why and you told me this story, JD, right? When, because Christina Bob came to you, and there was a story that she, or that, so before Trump's last visit to Michigan, before the November 22 election. Yeah. And all three of the candidates, Matt DePerno, Christina Caramo, and Tudor Dixon were at that event. And beforehand, in the green room, Trump meets with them and tells them, these are the bullet points that I think you should talk about. And Tudor Dixon, Matt DePerno did that, which this is very normal. This is a very normal thing. But Christina did not. She said what Matt Cloud wanted. It's like abortion in an election problem. And so
You're going to go on tour with the president. There's a script to follow. You're on message. You're working together.
Right.
And if you notice, they were together one time and then never again. There was a split.
Yeah.
And she never repaired that relationship. That relationship was not repaired when the president came to Oakland, that big fundraiser. And, we know Trump's behavior. We know how he does things. And so the things that he said were intentional. It wasn't an accident. He knows very well who she is. And at any point in time, she could have reached out and repaired that relationship. She chose not to. Why? I can't say. I can just tell you that she didn't. Before she was removed, there was no Michigan working with Team Trump, which is odd because there's so many Trump supporters, but no one was asking that question. And this is one of the things where it doesn't matter what I say or what Scott says. You just have to look around and just, ask yourself, like, hey, if we're all Trump supporters and the Trump support is missing, just stop for a second. Why is that? What's the problem? And if you ignore that, then you're going to face the consequence of what that is. And if you notice now, there are efforts. We're working very closely with Team Trump. Things are being done. Their plans are being put into place. Education is occurring. Outreach is occurring. So those are, some people just don't stop to look at that. They want to hear the right thing, and then that's it. They just want to end it. But you just have to look what is actually happening. She has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about profiling and Lavity. And Lavity, okay, so in regards to Kari Lake, Tudor Dixon, and Kristen Cornwell. when they profile, would they, or really participants in what they had done? And I always wondered, was Tudor Dixon set up to fail?
I can't answer that for myself. I don't have any relationship or knowledge with any of that. So all I can tell you is what I observed in the Cromwell campaign and then afterwards when she was running for chair, what was happening. She was very good at, you give her something to say and she goes out and says it very passionately. Excellent. But if you ask her about her plans, and okay, this is the problem. Some people, okay, the Republican Party has to face this problem, and some of you might not like it, but you have to face it. People were unwilling to ask her questions. What life experience do you have that's going to give you the skill to pull this off? It was a big job. And no one would ask her that question. It was off limits. Now, one problem is maybe she's a Black Christian woman, so she's off limits. But, when we were doing debates, we had 25 chair debates. That's never been done in history, ever. I mean, if you're sheriff at 25 debates, you might have a better sheriff today. And during all that time, no one was allowed to ask the questions. What is your business plan? How's it going to work? I'll give you a specific example. They said, what's your business plan? She said, I'm going to get 250,000 businesses to donate $5. End of discussion. Okay, well, the next follow-up question is how? Who's going to make those calls? No one asked. How long is that going to take? No one asked. What percentage of that will be successful? No one asked. It was just, and that's a plan. Ask any professional salesperson how they're going to carry that off. If I could just make that statement and it would happen, we'd all be wealthy because work wouldn't require work, right? So because people wouldn't ask those questions, there was no skill for a job. And that's something that we as a party have to deal with. Because if the grassroots is up to us to do it. If we don't raise the money, if we don't do the work, we don't have anything. We get really angry if someone jumps in and says, here's $1 million, you're going to do what I want. We're mad. But till now, if there's no money, no one raised any money either. See the problem here? So this is the physical work of the party that we have to actually deal with. If we want to have influence as a party,
So was she
we have to do
aware
the
of
work.
that? Was she aware of a willing participant, or do you think that she profiled to go along with what happened?
The profiling, I prefer not to answer that question, but I don't know. But the profiling includes, what is your behavior? What can I get you to do with that you won't ask questions about? Are you the type of person that does what I say without question? That's one part of the profiling. If you match that description, then congratulations, you just won yourself a job. And that's been a consistent pattern. And if you look at some of the people who were in the administration, they do that. They do certain things without question. I'll give you one other concrete example. There are some few people who have been in the administration and they espouse Christianity. They proclaim it. And they say certain things. But what they say and their attitude don't match what the Christian doctrine is. There's a huge disconnect. The testimony is not only wrong, it's harmful. It's drastically harmful. But that person fits that profile because what they're trying to tap into is they're trying to tap into Christian nationalism. There's 3 types of groups of people that work in the world throughout history. There's tribalism, nationalism, and now globalism. And if you don't like tribalism and globalism, you have nationalism. If you want globalism, you have to destroy nationalism. So, which group of people is upset? So they want, the profiling is, how do I tap into people who hit that nerve and function? I think what Scott will talk about here in a second is kind of like what Q did. We're in waiting mode. We're like, we want someone to save us, but we're not going to save ourselves. We keep looking and waiting. If you look at some of the, comment on this, the election integrity documents that have been filed, they weren't successful court documents. If you, let's say even if you have a legitimate claim, you take it to a judge, but you ask for something that the judge can't give you or is inappropriate to the case, it's going to fail. And if you look at some of these things, it looks like busy work. We're doing something, but they're not actually doing it. And we haven't actually achieved anything. The situation hasn't changed in all this time. So when you talk about profiling, you have to set up people who are going to do something that don't actually do anything.
For sure.
There we go.
I think to answer your question about, was Christina a willing participant in this? She became one.
Yeah.
I think by the time she was chair, she was definitely. I think that decision to run for chair required that she lied to herself about her own qualifications and lied publicly about her qualifications. And she did that. And that was when, in talking to Christy Claimer, that's when she decided that she needed to speak out. She was just going to move to Tennessee and have nothing to do with it. But when she heard Christina lie, when asked, and it was an outright lie, a deliberate lie, when asked, name 3 ways that you're good at raising money. Everybody knew that that was the thing that she was lousy at. And she gave 3 totally made up, pulled out of her butt answers for how she was going to be a great fundraiser and all of her natural talents at fundraising. And it was a lie. It was a completely deliberate lie. And what that signaled, what that showed to Christy Claimer, who knew her very well, considered a very good friend. After working side by side with her for 21 months, giving so much of her life to that. And she knew that at that point, not only was she lying publicly, but she was lying to herself. And that was, one of the things that was in my first report about lying that JD helped me to drill down into is the specific method that Mike Labadie employs to get his hooks into something, to emotionally and psychologically manipulate. And so the first thing is he builds himself up. And he would do that by saying he had been a member of the intelligence community, worked with the UN to prepare diplomats to work with these globalists, these bad guys, and he wanted to use everything that he learned against them. And, he built themselves up. He's larger than life. And then he would take an interest. The next step is he'd take an interest in the person that he approached. And the very first step was a profile. He never talked to anybody unless he determined in advance that it would be useful to him.
He watches for a while.
Right. Like he did with you for 2 months.
He
right?
gives you a task and then he watches you.
Right. Yeah. And so he might send someone else to record conversations with you, but without you knowing.
So the records everything. And then he analyzes it. He's always analyzing conversations with people.
Beyond creepy, right? And then what he would do is he would build them up. He would tell them you have such this. He would listen to you and he'd say something that's special about you, and then he would say, you have a very important role to play in saving the state and this country for future generations. And he would say what that role is. And who doesn't want to hear that, right? I'm really glad that I never met him because I probably would have fallen prey to that. But and then what he does is he tests them, and he gives them a test, and that test is to push the Overton window of their conscience, to try to test the limits of their own willingness to disobey their conscience. And Christy mentioned one particular episode where he was trying to get her to divulge something that someone else had told her in confidence. She said, I can't do that. And he said, but in times like these, this is important. We need to know. And she said that she remembered everything about every detail, where she was standing, what she was wearing, everything about how she felt. Like this was a very traumatic episode for her. And she held her ground. Well,
That's a good question.
yeah, that is a good question. And I believe that he's tied to Flynn and the American Project.
Here's what he told me. He tells a lot of people that he spent several years working in the foreign diplomat's office and working with foreign diplomats. He was a Democrat from California, I think up in 2016.
Yeah, he registered in end of September of 2016, so just a few weeks before.
Yeah, he didn't tell me that part. What he told me was that his career was working with foreign diplomats, and so did he. So I was like, when we started really talking about that, I was like, okay, that just doesn't sound, someone who works with the UN, but it was weird, but it wasn't enough to say, okay, this is the bad guy. That wasn't the thing, but that's what he does, is tell people his background. And coming from California, being Democrat, that's what he covered.
Yeah, and many of the operators in other states also came from California, but not all of them. In Idaho, it's actually very, very similar, strikingly similar. Brent Reagan moved from San Francisco. Labadie was from Southern California, but Brent Reagan moved from San Francisco to Idaho. And in the years leading up to, he actually got involved with the Ron Paul Libertarians, which especially in the Pacific Northwest, were doing the very same thing. And especially in Washington, one of my reports, I detailed that, how it was kind of a test run, I believe, for this larger operation to see how they could take over the party. And so Brent Reagan was involved with that, with this guy named Matt Shea. He ended up taking over Idaho Freedom Foundation, which is kind of a think tank, and that became the MIPF, the Delegate Recruitment and Indoctrination Vehicle in Idaho. Dorothy Boone ran for Secretary of State. She was part of Wano Savin. His real name is Wayne Willits. He organized this group of, I think, 7 or 8 Secretary of State candidates from across the country, including Christina, including Jim Marchant in Nevada, Mark Fincham in Arizona, Dorothy Boone, Rachel Hamm in California. And all of these people are very connected, very, very connected. And Dorothy Boone lost her Secretary of State race, but the entire time it was the same exact thing. All of her messaging was targeted towards this incoming class of delegates, these grassroots delegates. She ended up becoming the state chair. She ended up rewriting the party bylaws in major ways. They're having show trials now. They have Article 20, which enables them to remove anyone from the party for not failing to abide by what they believe is the Republican Party platform. And she also changed another change in the bylaws. And this is what really started to alert me about the National Convention 3 months ago when I learned this, is they created a select committee to select the delegates to the National Convention. So now the precinct delegates can no longer vote to select the delegates for National Convention. It's just a select committee that she controls. So she's basically handpicking. I mean, if you can imagine Christina Promo, I'm sure she wanted to do that. She just didn't have the time, or Jim Copas, I don't think is very good at what he does. And so they have a personality issue there too. But that was part of their intention, I believe, was to hand select. So if she could have hand selected all of her lieutenants, and we know who they are, including Bachman, but it would have been chaos agents, trained chaos agents, going to the National Convention, and that's what is being done there. So that really started to raise red flags and concerns for me about what's going to happen. You okay if I talk about Flynn now?
Yeah.
Go ahead. All right. So, because all of this ultimately, I think, does relate to Mike Flynn, and I mentioned that he was the director of the DIA. 2014, he was fired from that position after Russia invaded Crimea, and this was, like many stories about this, 6 weeks after that invasion, Obama fired him because he had led Obama to believe that Putin wasn't going to do it. That was an intelligence operation. He then started his own private intelligence firm that was doing intelligence operations for foreign countries, including Turkey and Russia. And in December of 2015, he accepted $45,000 to give a speech in Moscow. 2 months later, he joined Trump's team, just months before the start of Operation Crossfire Hurricane. Then, right after Trump was elected, but before he was inaugurated, Mike Flynn, who was a 33-year intelligence veteran, stepped into a perjury trap with the FBI. And I don't buy that he didn't know what he was stepping into. I think that he knew exactly what he was stepping into. I think that was a plan. It's just my view. I don't see how logically a 33-year intelligence veteran who'd been the director of the DIA could not know what he was stepping into when he went there and operated in turn. And so he ended up, and that was a perjury trap. He was indicted on that, which totally derailed Trump's presidency from the very beginning, before the inauguration even happened. He knew that he would be pardoned, you know. And what happened as soon as he got pardoned? He started the Reawaken tour. Immediately started touring around the country. Immediately. And what the Reawaken tour, right, and Vandersteel, Joel Altman didn't even exist in the public sphere until right after the 2020 election. One, yes, exactly. Exactly. So that whole podcaster network that they created, and this is really what it was about, was creating their version of the mainstream media that would deliver narratives to the grassroots. This is how they would indoctrinate us. And so, and what they would do at these events, so you could buy a general admission ticket, but you could also get a special like podcaster ticket. And if you get this, you know, it was like a podcaster builder ticket where you could actually be face to face with all these other podcasters. Laura Logan's one of them too. You're part of that network. And so you could meet these people face to face, but then they would put you one-on-one in a room with a scheduler. And that scheduler would actually schedule on your show. And they would personally invite anybody that had, somebody like me, that would have a podcast with, you know, 5,000 or so followers, or maybe 20,000 followers, or whatever it is, you know, relatively modest amount of followers. And they would invite them in. They would tell them how great they are and everything was so special. We got to get Clay Clark on your show. We got to get Mike Flynn on your show. And so they would schedule that for you. And then they would, and when Clay Clark, you can go to Clay Clark's X feed, and you'll see every single day he does 4 or 5 one-hour shows for somebody else's podcast. And the whole time that he's on it, it's like the same exact script. And you can just watch it. It's like watching the same thing over and over again. I've done it. And he, the entire time, he's building them up. He's talking about how great this host is, what a great podcaster they are, how they're so smart. You need to watch this because it'll make, this is the only way that you can really know what's going on in the world. And they'll build them up. They do all kinds of cross promotion. So in a short amount of time, they'll build them up from like 5,000 followers to 100 or 200,000 followers.
Be sure to buy their merch.
Well, yeah, that too, exactly. So, you know, it's all about building up their business, but they really do it for you. And in doing so, they create a massive codependency. What they're doing here in the podcaster world is the same thing that MIPF was doing with delegates, is creating it's essentially a cult. And in the same time, you're watching, you're paying attention, I mean, this is like, he's the rainmaker. Mike Flynn becomes the rainmaker. You know, and so, like, I actually know someone pretty well in another state that I was actually on a show, and he had just gone to one in Tulsa, one of these events in Tulsa, and he told me about it. And I said, well, you come on my show. I'd like to talk to you about it. I'd like to, you know, he said, because that would threaten, you know, his connection with that, which is going to have a really material impact on his business and on his family. What about what? What about food? You mean his connection with Flynn? Yeah, I don't.
I'm not a bad guy either.
Yeah, I don't particularly have an opinion on Putin aside from. Yeah, I think that he is. You know, he certainly has dictatorial tendencies, but and I think he's probably better than Ukraine. But you know, I think that's
Talk about dictatorial tendencies for a second.
yeah, go for it.
One of the things that I really love about our party and the rules of our party is it makes everyone equal and everything's open. And every single, you know, if we're all part of the same party, we're all on the executive committee, every single person can make an argument and has the right to be heard, the right to have a motion, pass that motion, and you have the right to see the budget. If you just ask for the budget, you're entitled to see it. And one of the things we don't understand is that the secretary must send along any notice that she gets. So if you want to send notice to everyone, I'm the secretary, I have to send it to everybody. I don't get to say, no, but I'll pass yours on. So it's open. One of the first things that happened after Christina took office was there was a movement initiated by Jim Kopis and the or the general counsel to have all of the subcommittees sign non-disclosure statements. Now, why would you do that? So look at what's happening. Think about that. We're supposed to have an open, we have an open society. We have an open government, and it's a great, great thing. How many people know what happened at the state committee meeting the day after Mackinac, the great big Mackinac fundraising event? Okay, so this is important to understand. So there was the day after the Mackinac fundraising event, which is traditionally our historical great big fundraiser, there was a state committee meeting. So all 100+ state committee members, met and had a state committee meeting. And you know what they voted on that day? They voted 46 to 42 to not see the budget. Now, why would you do that? Now, some people got up and argued that, we can't see the budget because if we show you the budget, and, they didn't want the Democrats to see it. So there was another vote that was taken to not have an audit. They specifically voted to not have an audit.
Can you do that?
Well, you can. And, okay, now this is really funny. They voted against having a roll call vote. Okay, now I want to lay some irony out for you. So about a month later, I went to Monroe County to give a report. And it just so happened on that particular day, they had called their senator and representative to account. They had like 6 of their elected officials who were asking them about, they were there to explain their public voting record. And it was pretty heated. There was one very heated argument between the executive committee and a Republican who was not making them happy with their vote. And so then they asked me to give a state committee report. So I said, yep, they got up and voted to not have a roll call vote, so you couldn't tell who voted for what. And they started laughing. I mean, so, you have the grassroots delegates doing the opposite of what they expect their elected officials to do, and I'm not sure what all grassroots think, but I mean, we have the opportunity to participate in our government and make it meaningful if we stand up and do it. But if we just go in and essentially act like children, then, we get what we deserve. Yeah, go ahead.
How does each one of us in this room so that you take account for it?
I can tell you I did that. I went back to my county and I told them how I voted and why I voted. One of the things that came up, the other vote that took place that day was holding the caucus under one roof, because typically each district has its own caucus. And this is the first time where it was voted on to move it to a single location. The reason we had to do that was because everyone was broke. And the candidates themselves had to pay $20,000 to rent the facility to pay. There were people who were upset about that because, it was like pay to play was kind of the thing. I voted for it, and my reasoning was a serious candidate is going to have that money. If you don't have $20,000, you're not a serious candidate. So, but I explained that to everyone. There are very few people who went to their counties and said, I voted to not see the budget. Okay. And that's a problem. That is a real problem in the party.
That really doesn't answer my
Oh, sorry.
But how do I hold you accountable for that? What do I do as a delegate or a member of GOP? Say, JD, you said you do this now.
Okay, this is my personal favorite topic. What makes our country great is not elections. What makes our country great is we have the power to remove people. We don't use it. If you're not happy with me, you need to remove me. And the party is dysfunctional right now because we all give our money to individual candidates and collectively we have nothing. I mean, there's an aspect of this where we're all just wasting our time. Just stay home, fund your candidate privately, and keep your time. Okay, why are we here? What are we doing? Why is this worth it? The party only exists to have power in numbers. Well, what does number get you? It gets you the power to remove somebody. Here's my favorite question. Why are there so many delegates per county? There's very few people participating, correct, and that's a problem. But why is there so many?
So many slots, you mean?
Yeah.
I'd like to know that answer too, because it seems to be different every couple of years.
Okay, here's what I believe. Because if those delegate slots were all filled, you have places where there's 150 delegates, you have places where there's 500 delegates in larger counties. If all of those people were active, by active, I mean you're influencing 5 to 10 people each, okay? You go to a meeting, you find out information, you report back to people. I assume that you have people who ask you how to vote. I have people that ask me for my opinion. If you are influencing some people, you're going to control the vote. And we've never done that before, at least as far as I can remember. If we could deny people re-election, that would be a start. Like, we're not happy, we're not re-electing you, because one of the problems we have is people depend on re-elected. They know they're going to be re-elected, and they know we don't have enough power to stop them from being re-elected. Okay, that's one problem. The party has that capability, but we're not using it. The other one is that if we were organized, if districts were coordinated, okay, if every county in your district had all of its delegates, they were functioning, and you were coordinating with each other, and your district representative was doing something tragically wrong, you could absolutely have enough people to recall him, because you would have a network that would go out and you could begin a recall effort. But we don't do that. It's been killed. And why has that been killed? Because don't give to the party, give to this, give to that, give to the candidate. So collectively, we've been robbed of our power. That is our political power.
So there's just, what you're saying, is if I want to remove you, but you didn't give an account or your company wasn't up to the standard that you set. I have to talk to all of my buddies and say, all right, we gotta get together, we gotta take the vote and get you out.
Okay, let's talk about.
Process involved that I gotta follow.
Yeah, let's talk executive county or executive committee in particular, because there are counties where one of the officers has taken upon themselves to spend money without authorization. I'll say that's happened. Okay, and this is a real life situation. The rules of the party give every person the grounds to begin to initiate a removal process, and there is an official removal process, disciplinary procedure to bring an accusation. The person does have the right to defend themselves, and it goes to a vote. And it actually is called a parliamentary trial. And there is a process to remove someone, and it is within the power of the group of people to remove anyone who isn't doing their job. Absolutely, we have that today. We don't even need to add anything.
So let's, if I follow that, it should work. Right there's a perfect example. Not following that, she got removed.
I did. I watched that video. I wrote up an analysis of all of the processes that were violated and done incorrectly in her removal. There was no process that was followed.
But then where does it go from there?
Well, it's not over
Is
yet.
it stalled or not?
Yeah, part of the answer is it's not over yet.
Well, let me just jump in with one thing. There's two aspects to our system. Okay, we have the rules, which is basically your weapon, but the votes are the ammunition. You have to have both. Okay, enough people have to stand up and say this is incorrect, and it's one of the problems that we have with ignorance. Ignorance and stupidity are not the same thing. Ignorance just means you don't know something, and too many people don't know certain things about the party, and so they haven't come together to make a good decision, based on the actual right thing to do, and it's something that has to be corrected. To be a good Republican, I'm going to say something that might make some people angry, but if you want to be a good Republican, you have to know the party rules. And if you don't, you're not a good Republican. You might be a good conservative, but you're not a good Republican. Okay, so it is the duty of every Republican to actually know the party rules. And then when someone is violating something, you know it, and you say, hey, this is a problem, and you can convince other people. Most people know when something's going wrong, you just don't know what it is. But the more people that know the rules are there for a group of people to function together. It's not for a private person. And the rules, like, okay, most people think that the chair makes decisions, but they don't. They don't make any decisions, okay? So because the chair doesn't make any decisions, how does the group make decisions? Well, that's what the rules are for. The rules show how does the group make decisions fairly, okay? To make a motion is one page, but how do you make a motion fairly? That's the other 599 pages. So when you know that, then you're not standing up speaking French and everyone's wondering what you're talking about. You know, it is incumbent upon us to train ourselves in that area. It's been lost on us recently.
Thank you.
Let's keep these rules if we can. Okay. We can only do that. That's right. We don't know. We're ignorant and figuring this voice. And if you don't learn them, know them, then it can be used against you. They bank on most people not knowing.
Let me say one more thing about this. We all like football. Should only the ref know the rules?
No.
Should only the coach know the rules? Should the players know the rules? What if only one? Okay, but here's the thing. Should the spectators know the rules?
Yeah.
How do you know if the ref made a bad call? And it's the exact same with exactly.
It is, but it will tell you majority rules, hands down. In my case, majority rules sometimes too.
It's like you said, JD, you also need the numbers. And part of this operation is very clearly one of the objectives is to discourage people from engaging in the process. And that's one thing that's happened nationwide is people just give up. Good people give up and stop engaging because it's painful to watch what they're doing. So, and part of that's because they don't know the rules. If we had the numbers that we started with, and like the nominating convention when Christina became the chair, 30% of the delegates had given up and gone home before they voted.
Yeah.
Because they made it help.
Well, there is another thing. That point is really important. A lot of people left. 30% just left after their initial choice didn't win. And that's really the wrong thing to do. You have to stay.
Is it not?
It is your obligation after
Stay
service
with
to
the
stay until the end, until the work is finished. And you're not supposed to have a proxy going for you. You know, it's your job to be there the whole time. And the fact that 30% left actually changed history.
It did.
Okay, it
It's a
did.
mess. It's a mess.
So, you know, those are the ramifications that we have to live with when you just go home. You know, one of the things that happened in the Christina removal process where people like, well, too few people voted. Well, this is part of our system. It's called abstention. If you abstain because you don't want to be in the fight, I don't want to get involved. This is the common thing. You are a state committee person. You have duties and obligations, but I don't want to get involved.
Yeah.
Okay, so you abstain. And when you abstain, you surrender your vote to someone else. You surrender a vote to fewer people. And there's a majority who could have won, but they abstained. So you can't, you know, the claim that a smaller number of people told a larger number of people what to do is incorrect. Larger number of people chose to abstain, which is a decision. So it's really, really important. The rules say people should not abstain. Okay? The rules say you can't compel a person to vote, but it says it is your duty to vote on every matter. Right? So it's, you know, but we don't like confrontation. I don't like confrontation. There's nothing about confrontation that I find interesting. But, you know, sometimes it has to be done, you know. So, and when you abstain, you surrender.
It's hard work.
I felt like you were kind of talking to me things that I had no idea about. You think you know something. And where were you going now? We had this conversation about the rules, right? How that works. You know, we have a convention coming up with this president.
Right.
And I feel like there are I'm seeing Flynn with a big bus with a big name and space all over it, which I found very strange. And I feel like there's something coming.
Yeah.
What is your opinion? I know
Yeah, so I mean, Roger Stone just tweeted this week that, and he's very close with Flynn. He tweeted with a picture of himself arm in arm with Flynn, and where he admits that that they are forming a contingency plan to make Flynn the president this year. So according to
You're
the
making the president.
correct, yeah. So has Flynn had any primary votes? No, he is appeared on the ballot. But you know, I've talked with other RNC committee members. I've talked with Solomon you. I've talked to some others about how this could happen according to the rules. How, you know, and this is something that Republican voters are completely ignorant of. Most delegates, state by state, are completely ignorant of. We believe that the primaries already happened. Trump's the nominee, and you know, all we have to do is think about the general. No, but I think that there's a very real risk. Most people within, so Solomon is more knowledgeable than most. I've talked to a couple RNC committee members that I told them my thesis, and they were shocked, but they said, "Oh my God, but yeah, that can happen." And so, you know, I think it's good to know about it, so I want to share it. So the way that it could happen, it starts really with the anger that there's a psyop right now that is an absolute irrational anger and hatred towards Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson. And do I like what Speaker Johnson has done lately? No, I don't. But I'm not about to let somebody else tell me who I should be angry with. And there is an absolute, this is the whole Flynn network that we just talked about. And C-Ban actually said this week, he said exact words, he says, "I don't care if it makes Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson's got to go." And that is the most probable outcome if they were to remove Mike Johnson. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, Thomas Massey, these are people that I've liked.
Yeah.
But they're calling for his removal, and they're smart enough to know what that would be. I don't believe that these people actually want Trump to be president. Because what would happen, that is the path. That's the first step in the path towards making Flynn instead of Trump the nominee. To me, I'm gonna step back. The biggest issue in this election is not the border, it's not abortion, it's not any number of really important issues. It's not the budget. Well, yeah, it's our freedom. It's the deep state. It is taking out the administrative deep state that wants to control every aspect of our lives. And the president actually has the power to do that. But there is only one candidate. There's only one human being in this country that has the ability to potentially get elected and the courage to take on the deep state. And that's Donald Trump. There's nobody else. Mike Flynn is the deep state. And he's the director of the DIA.
But then just the other day, I watched Donald Trump talk to Mike Flynn across the hall and say, "I'm behind you 100%.
Well, no, he didn't say that. He was making friendly overtures at him. And I watched that video, and my interpretation of that, the whole time I was watching that, I was thinking of the adage, you want your friends close, but your enemies closer.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was not an endorsement of Flynn. There was definitely
Sure
not.
felt that way.
I know that there were many people that interpreted it that way, but I would suggest that you go watch it again after we've had this conversation
Okay.
and see if you still think that that's the case.
Okay, because what I'm hearing on the other end is that actually people are saying I'm for Trump until I'm not, because I'm thinking Trump is part of all of them.
And that's one of the narratives that's being programmed into people. I'm hearing that everywhere. They're for Trump until they're not. That is part of the psyop. They're for Trump until they're not. So the way that it works is if Hakeem Jeffries becomes the Speaker of the House, then what he would do, and the timing was important, but what he would do is he would pass a resolution to label on January 6th as an insurrection. And the reason why he would do that is because the Colorado Secretary of State, as you probably recall, remove Trump from, tried to remove Trump from the ballot. Went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rejected it, partly on the grounds that it said in their ruling that one person can't declare an insurrection. It takes an act of Congress. So we get a resolution that says, okay, it was an insurrection. That's an act of Congress. And if the timing is such that it happens a short time before the convention, so that there's not time for the Supreme Court to weigh in, especially, and there's not time for people to become rational, to separate themselves from the emotions, to think clearly about it, then what all it takes to suspend the rules of the National Convention, this is according, I talked to Rob Steele about it, Solomon Yu, talked to a couple other RNC committee members, they all confirmed this. It takes one state, 2/3 of the national delegates from one state in writing prior to the convention, asking for a resolution, proposing a resolution to suspend the rules. Then it takes 7 other states seconding it. Rules are gone. The delegates are no longer bound to the results of their primary, to vote according to their primary. This is what JD was talking about, Ted Cruz trying in 2020 to do this thing at the convention to vote your conscience, because he wanted to be the nominee. He wanted to unbind the delegates from the primary election. So that's what it would take. And you just put yourself in that position as a delegate, and you're hearing all of this news. Do you think that Benson would instantly remove Trump from the ballot once that resolution comes through? Absolutely. In Arizona, it's the same way. They got a raging Democrat that are just like, so a lot of these swing states, that's going to happen. All of a sudden, there's going to be just a collective despair and anger. Similar to what happens, after Biden was inaugurated. Like, just what do we do? And these people are these chaos agents that they're sending. And there are many states that are sending, even here in Michigan, we're sending, fortunately, everything worked out. We were going to send all of our delegates were going to be chaos agents. It had the caucus has been held in Detroit. But there still are many that are going. There are many that are going. Not here in the first, fortunately, because of the Houghton Lake thing. But in many of the other districts, they did send some chaos agents. But in other states, like I know that we talked about, Arizona, they're deciding tomorrow, and it's not looking good. There are many other states. In Hawaii, it's actually the worst of any state. It's absolutely insane. And even in Florida, they will be sending chaos. Every state will. And so it only takes 8 states to suspend the rules. They also are masters. One of the things that they train on is how to manipulate a crowd. They disperse people throughout the crowd, and they work on a script. So at the same time, if you're in a crowd and all of a sudden everybody's saying the same thing.
They did that to us.
Exactly.
We were brand new.
Yeah.
And they did that to us.
And they've been practicing.
In August. They did that to us.
Yeah. And so they do that at the national convention. Everybody's in one
We
room.
had just filled our delegates because for years it was only like 12 when we had allowed 37. And until we learned Michigan precinct first taught us, and you and everybody else, so we all became delegates. And like you said, we knew nothing. We were going blind, and that convention was just like bonkers.
Yeah.
And 2 of our people were originals.
Right.
They left after their first vote.
It's
And they
a
kept
tricky-
giving us the dirty look and I said, you're not supposed to leave, are you? I said, you really think she's not going to win? And they left.
American government is complex, and it's a fine line between we all have to be individuals and not be controlled. And then there's a time where we have to come together in numbers to make a decision, and that fluctuates, and there's no clear guideline. So coordination at a meeting for a vote is very important. It's a very, very well-known maxim by any successful CEO that says, you never walk into a meeting without knowing how the vote's going to go ahead. Don't be surprised. And people in the Republican Party, we're always surprised. We're always like the last people to find out. When I first started attending Republican meetings, it's like, why am I finding out about stuff afterwards? numbers. They don't want to tell you, but then if they do tell you, you find out, oh, we voted on this last month. Well, why weren't we told 2 months ago that this vote was coming up? Why don't we try that? And so, there's an aspect that takes coordination, and when things make sense, people come together and vote collectively, and there's a time to use our collective voting power. That's the strength of the party. To me, that's the only purpose of the party. But then we have to be careful of mind control.
And that's where I think it starts, the answer starts with saying, no, I'm not going to let some podcaster or some news pundit or some news personality tell me to be angry. I'm just not going to let it happen. I'm going to think clearly.
On that note, besides you, who should we be listening
I don't know.
Because I've taken my Telegram channels last 2 weeks and read almost every single one of them. Because I started
listen to
putting
any of
pieces
that stuff.
together myself, realized it's all bullshit.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I like Bannon and Citizen Free Press for the most part. He supports Bannon and stuff, but citizenfreepress.com, it's a news aggregator site. You can just get a list of headlines. Sometimes he publishes my stuff, and I've been following him since he started. But and he's a little reluctant to sometimes print my stuff because he doesn't want to be divisive within the party. Yeah, I don't know.
Delegates should be making their own news network. What I mean by that is all of your delegates should be engaged in knowing what just happened at town hall, what happened in your township meeting. Why are those people wanting to sell their property to the Chinese? And if we knew this and we were telling people this is our own news network. And because we don't want, like I've been to township meetings, they're boring. Okay, I'm not trying to say that there's something exciting going on there, but something important is going on there. And what goes on there affects us. And what they do without anybody noticing has severe consequences. And so we have the ability to create our own news. We should, if the Republican Party wanted to be really effective, all of the delegates create a rotating network, send a person to different meetings so you're not exhausting yourselves, and you build a report and you say, these 4 townships have this going on, and you know what's going on 2 or 3 months ahead of time, and you tell everybody. And then when someone's upset, you get 100 delegates who march down to City Hall, and not just one angry person, because the reason nothing changes is one angry person goes down to City Hall and you can't do anything.
Thank you for backing me up. Yeah.
I was backing up. We had a cool thing happen in Pass a couple years ago where impromptu 340 people showed up at a town council meeting, and they called it at the last minute. They called it with 1 day's notice, and they really thought nothing was going to happen. And 340 people showed up, and they freaked out. And they sat there, and they had to listen to 340 people. Every single person went up and had 30 seconds at the mic. It took 6.5 hours to go through. Okay, but that's creating our own news. That's starting to build something. That was in Cass County.
I think too that every source of news can be good. I even read the Washington Post sometimes. I don't like being called an election denier and all the stupid stuff that they put in there. But we all have to be able to develop the ability to read a piece, to examine, some reporting and look at the evidence, not what we're being told the evidence is. And to examine, okay, are they just saying unnamed sources? Is this credible? What learning, applying logic to what we're reading and what we're hearing, regardless of the source, looking to the evidence and interpreting that evidence for ourselves. These days, we're told what to think about just about everything. And so, we need to examine that evidence and it's a skill that we all need to develop. It's similar to like being our own news source. We have to, logic is really the answer. And it's hard. And the other answer is getting involved. We need to build bigger numbers, but if there's anybody in this room that's not signed up to be a precinct delegate, we have a notary, we've got the forms, do it tonight. We need precinct delegates. And that, and we need not just precinct delegates, but we need precinct delegates that are willing to get involved in the party, to look at what's going on, to apply logic to what's going on, look at the evidence, and talk to people about it. And just like JD said, we have to be able to talk to people about it, make people aware of it. And when I talk to Solomon, he is more aware than really just about anybody else that I've talked to about what's going on within the party and how dire things are right now. And yet he's optimistic. And the reason why he's optimistic is because he's seeing more people realizing the position that we're in and what we need to do about it. If he's the only one like him on the RNC, we're screwed, right? But if we can become like Solomon, like I really recommend that everybody watch part 1 too. On these are some of the most, not because I did, because he is amazing. And if we could become like him, exposing wrongdoing, and that's really what he does. He exposes wrongdoing, and that's the answer. You got to find the wrongdoing and expose it, whether it's in your township, whether it's in the state, but starting within the party. They would not be doing this operation if the Republican Party weren't really the biggest threat that there is to them. And it could be the biggest threat. I think that the Republican Party is actually the solution to all of our political problems. And because of its structure that JD was just describing.
Okay, so what can we do?
Right.
We have to harvest ballots, okay? We have to do absentee voting. I'll give you a lesson that we just learned the hard way at the special election. Now, people wonder what can the regular people do. Well, the special election that we just had to replace 2 representatives was our chance to put a stop to things, okay? And we could have elected anybody in there, and then the House would have been even, and they couldn't have passed anything. Okay, that was our chance. That was our chance to mobilize. That was our chance to make it happen. But we're always one step behind. And what happened was the party actually organized an event better than they had organized it before. We're starting to fire on cylinders, I think. And we had some very good outings, and we organized. We actually, as a party, came together, gave people plans, gave them literature, sent them out. But what happened? They went out, and we went to talk to people to tell them who to vote for and why, but they had already voted.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Now think about that for a second. They had already voted. We already lost.
Yeah.
So our planning has to begin much sooner. Now, Republicans at heart don't like it. I don't like that law. I'm not participating. And this is the big one, okay? My vote doesn't count. If we want to win our country back, we have to convince people your vote does count. We have to flood it. There is a huge percentage of people who don't vote. We have to go get those votes. There's even Democrats who aren't far left people. You know, there's Democrats who are duck hunters. There's Democrats who don't like pornography in libraries. There's Democrats who don't want their children to be transgenders or take puberty blockers. Those people might vote with us. You know, we might have some common ground without compromising ourselves. You know, we have to mobilize a vote in a way that we've never mobilized before. And we get very caught up on vote on election day. That is over. But we can use this law intelligently the same way that they're trying to use it. Well, they're just going to cheat. Well, you know what? We can cheat too. We can cheat right back. The Secretary of State has to send out reports every morning about who voted. Well, we can use that information. We know where to spend our time. We know where not to spend our time. We know where to spend money. We know where not to spend money. We can intelligently use that information just the way they do. We just haven't tried before. We don't think that way, so we haven't done it. We have 6 months or we're going to lose everything. When Trump was just here, he came here twice in the past 6 weeks. He was the most somber I've ever seen him. And he said, we ballot harvest or we die. This is it. We're going to lose the country. The way legislation is set to go, if we don't win in November, you know, he sat in front of the auto union and said, you guys are going to lose everything if we don't win in November. So we have a real fight. We have to change the way we fight. Okay, the law changed. It's now the law. We can't ignore the law. We either adopt or we die.
On this note, Scott, can you talk about, there's a big movement right now, a big movement among some of these grifters to make you sad about voting, your vote doesn't count. Can you talk about Lynn Wood in the movie?
Yeah, so, and I mean, I think we've all seen it. I mentioned earlier the machine fraud narrative. and one of the, one of the reasons for that narrative, one of the intended results of that narrative is to discourage people from even voting. Because if the machines are creating fraud, then that's something that we definitely can't control. And I don't believe that it's true that the machines are creating fraud. I haven't seen any evidence that that is true. I'm looking at it. I actually did a recount in my little tiny township in Deerfield Township in Fayette County, and the machines counted the votes exactly right, and we didn't count it. And and that was just one sample, but I've talked to other people that've done much larger samples in Oakland County and elsewhere. And there is no indication that there actually was machine fraud. But that narrative is being used, even today. Anyone who's talking about machine fraud today, you should not listen to them. They're doing that to discourage, not just distract, but to discourage you from voting at all. I would, yeah, because I think he's continuing to promote that narrative. Well, I don't know. I think he's either just kind of, really gullible, and this is one thing that one of the reasons why they targeted Christians in this whole psychological operation is because we tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? And we tend to believe the best in people, and he's like that, and so I don't know him, so but I do know that what he says is most often wrong. So Mike Lindell has not been on the right side of the punch. Yes.
Okay, I have two things I want to say. First of all,
Right.
she doesn't necessarily need to win. If we come out with overwhelming numbers, harvesting ballots, getting our fellow Republicans and Democrats to vote, and if we can stop this steal.
Yeah.
Because cheat doesn't equate to steal. They cheated in 2016, but they won. And I think we have seen proof of machine cheating. We can talk about that. That's how we got off in this one day. So we want to address that as much as possible.
I can, but you have a question first.
Yeah, I just wanted you to clarify what you said, the Democrats cheat, we can cheat too, cheat, maybe even quotes for playing with the new.
I was being humorous. Yeah, don't take me literally on that. What we can do is intelligently use that data. That data gives us advanced warning notice, and any military operation would use that. And to ignore that would be to our own peril. We are actually in a military operation, and so we can use that information to effectively manage our operations, just like they can. It will tell us a week ahead of time, we're this many votes short in this area. And if we want to win, we have to go. Now we can just sit back and ignore that, or we can do something about it. But that information can absolutely help us if we choose to use it. Yeah, there's I have a video from a woman who won her special election in a Democrat area, and she talks specifically how she utilized that information to win. Just a really, really good video. And we have a lot of Republicans who are trying to run for office, but they don't have a lot of experience of how to run a campaign. What's great about this video is it's from someone who won. We have to start learning and passing on knowledge from people who won, who want to win. If we just run some candidates and they go get a couple votes and get slaughtered at the poll, we haven't achieved anything. That's kind of been the way we've operated. We have to get serious. If in your area you want someone to win, go find someone who won. Say, what did you do? The law has changed. Now we need to do something different and make a real plan that's going to deal with it.
Yes, I wanted to talk about stuff you were thinking about, causing people to lose hope. These documentaries that make it seem as if there's no hope, being not in coordination with predictive programming on the inevitability of civil war. And I guess tell you the number of people who are apathetic politically who are resigned to the fact that civil war is going to happen. I lose patience with people almost every day for promoting that area. Just gullible people who I think it's the greatest idea ever. People have never been to war. And it's run in coordination with, well, there's no more hope for voting, you know, that's it. So I guess it's kind of this.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with you. I think that if you look at, put yourself in mind of the head operators, the ones that are designing all of these different chaos narratives, what they really want is an actual nationwide insurrection so that they can justify martial law and put in some of their objectives. And so that is absolutely the same thing. You know, one thing that I see too is with this sovereign citizen theory stuff that's so popular right now in this district. And then there's actually an operator from Arizona, David Jose, who's leading a lot of this. And I believe he's a Fed. He was a 3%er. I just got that from somebody that was a 3%er in Arizona. I knew him from that. And the 3%ers believe that there's no political solution, only military solution. And so it's a heavily infiltrated organization for that reason. The FBI really likes to infiltrate that type of organization. So yeah, I think that is, you're spot on with that. And if you look at these narratives and how they talk, what they're trying to tell people to do, and how they're feeling that apathy, that despair, that hopelessness, and yeah, we just got to get our guns and take over, or we got to. Donna Brandenburg, she told me in a recorded call, she told me that they were planning on getting people to go into townships, demand that they do paper ballots only, one-day voting, and hand counts, or goodbye to you. Those were her words to the township clerks. And what that's going to do is land a bunch of people in jail. But ultimately, what they're trying to do, they're fomenting. And there's an organization right now, actually, Mickey Klon is involved in that. And I talked to somebody this morning that I'm going to, that is a whistleblower on Mickey Klon. They claim to have 2 million followers nationwide, doing that very thing, trying to take over township and county governments by force. And by demand, this is not American Revolution stuff, although they use the language of they pretend to be American Revolution. This is French Revolution stuff. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's another thing that Mike Flynn often talks about. There's not going to be an election. Yeah. The only way that would happen is if they create a dangerous level of mass psychosis.
All right, I'd like to comment on election integrity for a second. So some of the things that I do know was I watched the CEO of Dominion give his testimony to the Senate, and he said many technically incorrect things. And in relation to the machines, are they secure? Were they following regulations? What the testing was, and they thought a lot of that was nonsense. I did participate in some of that before with relation to banks. Now think about this for a second. Banks are online. Banks are connected. Our banks are connected to China. Our banks are connected to Russia. Is there any problem with their money? No. There's being online is not the problem. Our money is secure. What makes the banks secure is not that they couldn't ever be broken into, but there's an excellent audit system. Banks are masters of auditing, and auditing catches everything. So we don't need to be afraid of it being online. We don't need to be afraid of the machine doing the work. We just have to have the ability to audit and double check it. And that's been now removed to, that's which used to be our right to check that at any point in time. That's now been removed from us, and we have to get that back. As a party, we have a problem because our electors have been indicted, criminally indicted. Okay, well, think about this. Let's say Trump wins. Who's going to cast the electoral vote?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to go to jail for that and spend your whole life savings? Because that's what's happening to the previous electors. And we haven't united as a party to bail them out. Matt DePerno, who was our champion of election integrity and started all this, brought to our attention, he's been indicted. He has a huge, huge ongoing legal expense. What are we doing as a party to help fight that lawfare that's happening? That's what we have to do as. You talk about some of the people problems. Well, our people problem and, the computer problem is easy because it's not confrontational. But what do you do when the sheriff comes and arrests your clerk? Well, are we going to stand up and tell the sheriff no? I mean, that's what it's coming down to. That's what we have to do, like, in a non-violent way, but I'm not advocating violence, but people have to stop this from happening. Hold on one second. Other people problems that we have are, I forgot. Go ahead. What's the question?
I just has nothing to do with what you're talking to tonight, but when you just hit on a couple things with, like, I haven't heard anything from Ryan Kelly, nothing about him, he's out now. So is this part of his role? That
He's been silent on that, so I can't say. I don't want to comment on that. The last time I did speak with him before he went to jail, he just said, I'm going, I just want to go and be quiet and serve my time and go home to my family. So any other questions you need to ask?
I think we should probably wrap it up if we got one more question. Or if we just end it here. Go ahead.
Just one comment. I think it's really interesting, the whole, because I was on the fence with when I saw the bus and that really, and I said, that put my flag up. I'm like, why, that's a political bus, but this campaign bus. And so I didn't see that. So that kind of swayed me, but I will say this, they think why they would choose him. Everyone thinks he's this hero. Everybody thinks, oh, this poor guy, and he's a victim of the deep state, blah, 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 right? So many people would accept that poison.
The narrative is going to be, he's just like Trump, but he doesn't have all the legal problems. He doesn't have all the baggage. That's going to be the narrative. But he's not just like Trump. Because of the matter that matters, the issue that matters most, the elimination of the deep state. He is the deep state.
Yeah.
He's just going to make us strong.
Our Congress is terrified of himself.
Right.
Yeah, he is.
All right, everybody. Oh, is it up? I think we could sit and listen to these guys all night, but it's 9:30 and I think we just have the room till 10. So I just have a couple closing comments. First of all, can we give them a round of applause? And I just have to say again, like this, my husband will attest, this has been like a year and a half of my life. It's been stressful, and I know my husband for duty too. And like where this guy just came out of nowhere and started reporting on it, it was like some of the best help we've had. So thank you, Scott, for everything you've done. And you, yes, Scott is trying to do this full time. He's working full time with, I think, Arizona actually more now than Michigan. And I think everybody and their cousin is sending whistleblower information to Scott. So please subscribe to his channel. It's biggertruth.substack.com. So, and then also, yeah. So, do you have all your content put together on one site yet? Because you still have your first articles on your website.
Everything's on the Substack.
It is. Go to his Substack, and he has all the first article.
All my articles, everything's on the Substack.
The first article he did was on Lavity and exposing Lavity. Then he did a really good article on Christina's inner circle. You can tell a person by their inner circle. Her inner circle was criminals. He has an article. There's all the documents on there. You can see it all.
And some of it's archived. It's $5 a month, and you have complete access to everything. I also do a members only podcast. Just for members.
Then those are really good. And I have 2 of our local delegates paid for the hall tonight. So any donations that will go into this, I'll split between JD and Scott. So please tip them if you would be so kind. Yeah, go in there. And then tomorrow's our homesteading event at the Sioux Fellowship Church. And both of these gentlemen will be there. You can please come and talk to Scott there. And please consider being a precinct delegate. I'm not gonna, it's a cult that is following this movement. And I'm not, would you guys disagree with me that it's a cult?
Yes.
You would, okay, you would agree with me. And we saw some stuff last night that my friends were with me that, yeah, it was a little bit more than we ever anticipated seeing. I am not exaggerating when I'm telling you it's a cult. And it has taken, I believe disagree with me anytime. I believe there are key paid operators in the state of Michigan, and they're preying on Christians. They think they're in a holy war. They think that God, I actually saw Anna Camp post, God is pleased with our work. Yeah, and it's taken good people and they are sucked right into this.
Yeah.
So I have my Delegates for Trump shirt on. They're starting a wonderful training website, and we're doing Delegates for Trump. Kevin Rinke will actually he ran for governor. He'll be at the Homesteading Expo at our Delegates for Trump. So I would really, if you're not a delegate, please get involved in our party. Our party, I'm so proud of it. We have done many great things. We just had a super successful fundraiser. And it's taken a lot to get where we're at because our local party had filed a waiver since 2015 or 7.
Since the beginning of it.
So what that means is our local party hadn't raised more than $1,000. So that means the local people aren't used to donating. And when you donate to a local party, you have to give your address, you have to give your work. Like we have to train people to donate. It's just never been done here. And the office was always done at the past chair's local business. We actually have a local office and we have, I'm going to be doing an office sponsorship program to help pay for our office. We need precinct delegates to get involved with our group to help us. We're great people. We've done great things. Can I say, I said I'm a great person. We're fun. Sorry. We've built a great group. And then when they were talking about absentee ballot chasing, we have gotten I-360 data. And what that does is that every day will give us who requested an absentee ballot so we can follow up with them to make sure that they vote and how we want them to vote. And then also when we do walk and call lists, I-360 data is totally up to date. So we're not calling and spending resources on people who've already voted.
Right.
So our party has an office, we have I-360 data. And we will be doing office sponsorships. So
We have a membership.
yeah, we have memberships. I'm really proud of our leadership. I'm proud of our team. Gary took on being a treasurer and that was new for him. I mean, campaign finance is a whole new world, you guys. So I hope you consider joining our group. We're working really hard and we're trying really well. So being a precinct delegate is a big part of that. Then I'm sharing, I'm glancing at people, trying to make you feel guilty. So please donate, and so I can share these guys. Thank you to the precinct delegates that paid for the room. Okay, so 2 things I want to mention. Somebody asked, what other shows do you watch? I have recently learned about who Mike Gill was. I'm not going to even try to tell you who Mike Gill is because that's a whole different rabbit hole. You can Google that yourself. But by finding Mike Gill, I found the Michelle Moore show. And one of these ladies shared the link to other than Scott McMahon's, the best podcast I've ever seen about what's going on right now. I can't even remember there's so many PSYOP programs going on us right now, you guys. And I believe wholeheartedly these were planned before the election was stolen because they're way too coordinated and they're way too effective. And even if you're listening live, if you're here, this Michelle Moore podcast, 2 of them is required watching because they have a whistleblower that was involved in Arizona state nationalism. And they suck these people in about being sovereign citizens. You'll have your own driver's license, you'll have your own license plate, and you have to pay thousands of dollars. You have to go to these trainings. You have to send everything certified mail to become your sovereign citizen. And there's all this money in a trust. They're going to start paying your mortgage. They're going to start paying your bills, but you have to provide them your social security number. You have to provide them your mortgage papers. And these people are participating in this. And a whistleblower came out and talked about it. Will you take it from there?
Yeah, I talked to him this morning about that, actually.
What is his last name?
Tucciarelli.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what you want to say about it, but he actually, he ended up having contact, like kind of instant contact with, he worked directly with Nick McCron. He was connected with Ann Anderson very closely.
Yeah.
And Wayne Willits of 107 and also with my friend. So he was just like thrown into this after he was in Sedona, which is actually where I grew up in Arizona, and that's where he lives. He was arrested in 2020 for going into the natural grocery without a mask on. And so it's after that he got a bunch of publicity. That's how he was like immersed in this whole world. And so he's a whistleblower from the inside of the whole Hood network. It's pretty fascinating. So he's probably going to be on my show the next week or 2. And I'll probably be on Michelle Moore's show too, sooner or later.
Scott McMahon and Michelle Moore are the two shows that I'm really participating to. And that guy, what's his name again?
Matthew, too, sure.
Okay, I'll never get the last name. So then he did a part 2, and the part 2 podcast was all about how people were inviting him to dinner. They were bringing him in interviews. They were really building him up to make him seem like something.
Like you said.
Yeah, Michelle Moore and Rumble. And then the last one was he went to some mansion in, I think it was California, where it had a bunch of really wealthy cryptocurrency people there. People were, I can't remember if he said there was, I think that he said there was, I don't want to say, 'cause I can't remember for sure. But just imagine a very wealthy home in California with young crypto people. There was a variety of activities happening. And then it turned out the owner of the house was from Ukraine before the Ukraine war started. It is required reading to go watch these 2 podcasts, you guys. It'll blow your mind, and it awakens you up to what the stuff they're playing on us. And then he did a really good interview with Basil.
Very close.
And I'm going to play the first 10, 20 minutes of that interview at our next True North Patriots, because that interview talks about how if the FBI thinks that you have an effective Patriot group, you're going to make change, you're going to do some great things, they'll find you, they'll infiltrate you, they'll send disruptors, and your group is destroyed in no time.
Well, I think to be fair to you, he was talking about militia groups.
I know that, but I think it's still probably some of the same.
Well, I think that they do, and what we've seen is infiltration likely by the government here in Michigan and public appointments. And,
Yeah.
and you know, they're involved, certainly.
Yeah. So, anyways, yes.
So I just want to ask something that may not be very popular for anybody, but it's a question in my head.
Here, you can have the microphone back.
To kind of ask it because it's going to be a decider one way or the other. Do you think Dr. Andrew Huff is part of that, or is he one of the good guys?
I think, I believe that. I talked to him about it.
Because my gut feeling when I first met him is that's exactly what he was.
Right.
I mean,
He might be, and I've wrestled with that a lot too. I'm doing a little bit of research on that.
okay, so then I'm not
I'm
clear.
trying to verify it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and that question is really important question to ask, like everybody that's reading.
Yeah, well,
And everybody
yeah, I
that you
kind of
listen to,
do.
is this person who they say they are?
Yeah,
And I honestly, I'm not 100%, I tend to believe him, I think he's being sincere.
Mm.
But his stories are absolutely unbelievable. Dr. Huff, he's the one that was the Eco Health Alliance whistleblower that exposed, it's because of Dr. Huff that we actually have actual evidence that the virus came out of the Wuhan lab, that it was the product of gain of function research, and that it was funded by the US government. He's able to, and he wrote a book, I read his book. But the government, he believes that the government spent, he believes that the government spent about $50 million persecuting him. Based on the things that he did, and the things that he says that the government did to him are unbelievable. It's absolutely insane. Infiltrating to the level of infiltrating the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
And his neighbors and making his neighbors into confidential informants. Yeah, and even this week, the reason why he's not here is because he said that there was somebody in his driveway using a government level, some sort of electronic device to hack his cell phone, his cell network. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, there is some really unbelievable stuff there. But, yeah, no, it's.
Okay, would you
It's
please
crazy.
kind of let us know through Mel or when you come back to the event, since we kind of told you to come up here from convention, what you find out about that?
Yeah, it's gonna take me probably a month or so.
Oh, well, even if it took you half a year, I still want to know,
Yeah,
because I'm praying for that guy. I laid my hand on his heart and said, I'm praying for you, because there was something that this wasn't right.
right. Yeah. I don't know. So,
Oh.
that'll tell.
Finish up one more thing. The other thing about podcasts to watch, I have really learned, and a lot of this is thanks to Sue Aller. Sue Aller pointed it out to me that when you listen to people, you have to use your IQ to think things through logically. And if you listen to people and you use EQ, use your emotional or EI, using your emotional intelligence, like stop listening to them. They're getting you riled up and they're using your emotions all the time. You have to commit to people. And I had somebody that I listened to a lot and they would get me riled up and I'd listen and I'd be angry. So I cut that out. You have to be with people who make you think intelligently and logically and not based on your emotions. So that when I figure out who I'm going to listen to, I use that now as a litmus test a lot. So.
I listen to all of
We're in crazy time.
I cut her off my telegram.
Yeah. So, yeah, anyway, I was hoping for 20 people, 15 to 20, we got 20. And I want to give a shout out to our bartender. I have to tell a really cute story. Good night. Come on out, take a bow. So,
It's the shirt.
it's the shirt. When I came in, he's like, may I ask what party this is? What your function is? And I'm like, well, isn't that awesome? So I tried to get him to sign up as a PD. I still might, but he said, can I ask what kind of function you have? Well, and I'm like, anymore, you just don't even know what to say. I'm like, it's a political function. He goes, kind. And he said, oh, I see your shirt. Thank goodness. So he went home and put his shirt on. So the Chippewa County Republican Party meets every fourth Monday at our new office at 110 Ridge Road. So we'd love to have you. Street, whatever. All right, yeah, street. All right. We're done. Thank you. Donate, subscribe, and come to the Homesteading Expo. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you so much. I mean, you just broke every bubble that was in my head tonight, but I guess they needed